So one of the announcements in the budget was that contactless payment, the limit we can use when we're tapping and paying on our cards, is jumping up from £45 a transaction all the way up to £100. It's a huge jump considering it was only a year previously, the limit was 30 quid. We only had 11 months of it, that extra 45 quid. That is a massive next step up. And some people are kind of really pleased about this. They think this is great for terms of their convenience. Other people aren't so sure, particularly when it comes to things like security. So what I want to do in this video is take you through very quickly the pros and cons of contactless and exactly what you need to do to make sure that your card is safe, that you are protecting yourself against fraud, but also some of the other things you might want to think about before you get too carried away just tapping and paying and tapping and paying. I'm Andy Webb. Thank you so much for watching this channel. If you like the sound of it, if you want to get more of these kind of videos, please remember to hit that subscribe and notification bell as well so you won't miss any of them in the future. Right, let's get into it. Contactless cards, you all know what this is by now. We've been using them for, I think, since 2007 here in the UK. The first ones came out. I actually had one of these. It was with Barclaycard and it was kind of a combination of a credit card and your Oyster card to use it on the tube in London. So I had one of these very first ones. I loved it and it was great, and I could do just one card for pretty much everything that I did, right? Didn't have to have multiple cards. That was back then. Things have moved on a lot. We've all got used to it. And in fact, the most recent figures show that almost 2/3 of debit card transactions are now done contactlessly. For credit cards, it's a little bit less. It's around just under 50%, 40 something percent, 40, let me check, I've got it here. 46% of credit card transactions are contactless. But I imagine that's because if we're paying by credit card, a lot of time then maybe those purchases are a little bit more expensive. So there's less of them out there which would fit into that previous limit. But now at £100, those figures I'm sure will shoot up even more, because I don't know about you, but the reason when I don't use contactless, when I have to use chip and pin, it's because that purchase was above that previous £45 limit, supermarket, petrol, whatever it might be. Now, of course, a lot of that kind of acceleration in use in contactless has been because of the pandemic. Because we've not wanted to use cash. We've not wanted to actually use the keypads if we can avoid it. So obviously we've been using more and more. But that's a kind of habit that's going to stay, and it's going to increase and increase and increase, particularly, say, with this upper limit. So why are they increasing this to £100 all of a sudden? Why such a big jump after just a year? Well, the real reason is because they can. In the budget, there was hardly anything about Brexit. It was mentioned, not even hardly at all. Maybe the only time it came into play was around this contactless card question, because the previous limits have been set by the EU. So when they increased the amount you could increase it by, so did everyone else, all the other EU members. Now we're not part of the EU. We can do what we want. And it seems that what we want is to increase our contactless limit to £100. So that's pretty much the only reason. There's not really, I don't see any reason why £100 on contactless is going to make you spend more money necessarily. It's not going to kind of, reinvigorate our relationship with the high street when it does reopen, because we could spend that money before. We just had to put in a 4-digit number, So I don't think there's any kind of motivation in that sense. It doesn't do a huge amount. Or it could just be maybe they're thinking, hey, people who want it, let's do it. Or there hasn't really been much evidence that lots of people are crying out for this. Personally, I am quite pleased about it. It's going to make it a lot easier for me. I use my cards pretty much for all purchases, rarely use cash, and it does make it a lot simpler just to tap. But again, there's not a real reason, big change that's going to happen as a result of it. What the knock-on might be, though, are a couple of things I mentioned before. Let's talk about security first of all. Now, a lot of people who have been wary of contactless or a bit scared of it, often older people who aren't so keen on moving on with new things, but lots of people have this fear, is that people can steal your money. Now, a few ways people might do that. Obviously, they could nick your wallet or your purse when you're out and about, particularly people if they just leave their bags around. Often it's in the pub, isn't it? Where your friend loses their wallet, it's because they've left it on the table in the pub, turned around and it's gone. That's always happened. Obviously, having a £100 limit, I think absolutely, yeah. If you're a thief, if you're a crook, you think, well, I'm going to get more money now from stealing cards. So we could see an increase of that when we're in positions for people to actually steal our cards. Obviously, right now, still during the pandemic, at the time of recording this, still during lockdown, no one's really going to get hold of my cards. But that absolutely could be more likely to happen, 100%. The other thing that people worry about with contactless cards is something called skimming. You might remember a few years ago, there were these sort of pictures shown of someone with like a card reader. I can't remember where. I don't think it was in the UK. I think it was somewhere like Russia or something like that, and trying to sort of scan people's cards through their bags and stuff. Now that, as a kind of fraud, sounds really scary and you worry about that. But in reality, it doesn't really happen. You know, there seems to be no sort of real evidence that this happened on any kind of major scale, if at all. Because it's not just a case of like, oh, they have to wave this magic wand over your bag. They've got to be within at least 10 centimeters of your card. There's got to be no other kind of cards or keys in your wallet. They've got to have an account where they can actually process the money through, and they need sort of special terminals and stuff. So it's quite an operation to do this, and it seems that didn't ever really happen at all. Okay, but that's the kind of thing where people worry about this contactless technology, those two things. So what does this mean now with the the increase, and should you worry about it just generally? Well, as I mentioned, that £100 one, yes, it could happen more often. The skimming, I don't think it really likely to happen at all. But there are some ways that you can protect yourself from this. Really simple ways. Obviously, try not to leave your wallet laying around, so it could be stolen. Making sure if you have got a handbag or whatever, you don't have it wide open with your wallet sticking out the top, that someone can just walk through and nick it. Although pickpockets can be pretty clever in how they do this. I got pickpocketed in Argentina on holiday once in Buenos Aires, and they were so fast and sharp about it, I had no idea. And this is someone who's pretty savvy and across things to make sure this doesn't happen. It still happens to me, so it could happen, but do your best to try and avoid it if you can. So you can obviously, ideally, don't let that happen. Don't let your cards out of your sight. If it does happen, and obviously there are ways it can happen, then I would suggest setting up on your mobile banking app a few different things, or being aware of these settings at least. Not every bank has this, so you want to have a look. And I will do a video. I know I keep promising this, but it's a lot of work that goes into it. I will do a video looking at the majority of the different banking apps and the features they have in them. But one of the best ones you can get, and more banks are doing this, and credit card companies, is instant transactions, instant notifications when you make a transaction. So your phone, you tap your card and it will beep up and it will show you that you spent this much on your card. Some of them will do it via text message as well. So if you don't have the apps and you're not keen on that, you can still get text message notifications. Now this is great because if you are sitting at home or out with your friends and a notification pops up either in the phone or via text message, and that wasn't you, then that's a good indication that someone either has your card, they've stolen it, or perhaps they've cloned it. That's a different thing. But what you can do there, once you see that, is you can get in touch with your bank and you can cancel that card. Now, another feature which lots of banks are doing now is allowing you to freeze your card straight away in the app. So you hit that and it stops the person using it straight away. You don't have to get on the phone, be on hold, or whatever you have to do. It is frozen straight away. That's also quite a nice handy little feature that if you've lost your card or you think you've lost it, but no sort of fraudulent transactions have come through, you can freeze it straight away just in case you haven't lost it, you've just left it at home or in a different room, which, let's face it, we've all done that, haven't we? So this thing, if you find it again, unfreeze it and start using it. Obviously, if it has been stolen, then you then cancel it and get a new one sent through. So those things, absolutely really simple things that we can do to kind of mitigate against any kind of fraud that might happen. You could also, if you're worried about the skimming, you could get one of these. Now, this was given to me at an event. This is a RFID blocker card. And it is, you can see it's the size of a credit card, but you might be able to tell here, but it is thicker than a card. And this is essentially, you put it in your wallet and it would stop anyone kind of skimming your cards without you knowing it. Personally, this is the first time I've taken it out of this, and I've had it a couple of years. It's not something I'm bothered about. The risk of that fraud is quite low, and I want to try and avoid adding cards to my wallet. I'm all about trying to go cardless, let alone cashless. So I've not added it, but they are out there. If you are particularly worried about it, you can buy these things. Or if you want the cheap version, you could potentially just put some aluminium foil in your wallet. Although that's probably not too far off the older tinfoil hat kind of area as well. Although this is it could happen. This isn't as crazy as some of the conspiracies that people who might go for thinking there are aliens out there. Anyway, I digress. So you could do that as well. Now, if for some reason, whatever you do from those things, it doesn't prevent fraud, you still have money stolen from you via contactless. And as long as you haven't given your card to someone and they've gone and cloned it or whatever, as long as you've been responsible and this fraud has happened without anything that you couldn't avoid it, don't worry, because any of these transactions will be refunded to you. And the most that you could lose is £300. That's the most you could possibly lose from contactless fraud. And that's because there are some new regulations that came in late 2019, it was now, which limited how many transactions you can make with a contactless card before you have to enter the PIN. So all this kind of like, great, fantastic, we never have to enter our PIN with this increased contactless limit, you're still going to have to do it. Now, this has also increased due to our new limit. So it's gone from a cumulative total of £130, which is what it was before, up to £300. So if you spend £300 across, it could be three £100 transactions, it could be more than that, but smaller amounts, then you have to enter your PIN. Or if you make 5 contactless transactions, the 6th one has to be with a PIN as well. And you might have actually already experienced this bit of protection and not realize what's happening. You might have thought that your card has been declined. No, actually all that's happened is you've had those 5 transactions, or you spent 130 quid, now up to £300 without entering a PIN. If that does happen to you when you're out and about and you don't realize it, because most banks aren't going to say to you, this is the problem. Some of the newer ones will sort of notify you in the app and say, look, don't worry, it's just security, you need to enter your PIN. Just insert the card, enter your PIN, and it should be fine. So don't get embarrassed, don't get flustered, don't worry too much about it. Just give that one a go. Of course, if you are overdrawn or up to your limit, then it could be declined for another reason. But for most cases right now, that's probably what the reason is, if your card has been declined when you've been using it contactlessly. And obviously that is another great protection against anyone who does steal your card or tries to skim it, because they will be hit with those same limits. Even if you don't spot it to freeze it beforehand, they can't spend more than that. So yes, £100 limit, increased limit, I think will increase the chance of fraud on these cards. It's not very big right now. I'm sure that will increase, particularly when we get back to normal. We can get out there and our cards are easier to steal than they are when they're sitting on us at home. But there are things you can do to mitigate that. So that's security. That's the main one. I'm not too worried about that. I think they are very, very reasonably safe to use. I'm going to carry on using them contactlessly. The next one to talk about is the kind of how it affects our spending. So like you, the tap and the pay, it's very easy in more normal times. Appreciate we've not been doing this for the last year, but just to tap and tap and tap and tap. And when you do that, sometimes do you even look at the card reader? Do you even actually see exactly how much it is you have to pay? Particularly when you think about you're out in places like bars, where you just get a few drinks in, tap, few drinks. Now, there are a few problems with this. One, you're not keeping track of your spending. It's much, much harder to know exactly what you're doing, what you're spending, not just on each individual transaction, but also as a whole, and much harder to sort of understand exactly what your balance is. Now, if you're someone who is prone to spend more than you really know you should, that can be bad as well. You know, eats into those savings that you've hopefully built up over the last year, potentially could put you into your overdraft, cost you lots of money in charges. It's not a good thing. Okay, so that's really important thing there, is to make sure that you are looking at least looking at how much you are being charged. Ideally, you want to ask for a receipt as well. But I appreciate that sometimes not possible, and also it's extra bits of paper you don't really want to do. You can, of course, instead, if you want to, just check the transaction on your app. But I would make sure that if you haven't seen it, if you haven't seen how much it is, you just hand the card over. Maybe again, this is sort of a bar scenario, probably more likely than elsewhere, but you hand your card over, they've tapped it and given it back to you. Ask for a receipt. Because again, you don't know how much you've paid, because it doesn't help with tracking, but also you could have been overcharged. You don't know that a mistake could have been made. I've had that before where it's come through and I'm like, no mate, that's not how much I should be paid for these, whatever it was, 2 drinks. Sometimes you never know, maybe someone's chancing their arm. A lot of the time I think they're just confused, type the wrong button, they're busy, whatever it is. So that's a really important thing to think about. You can lose track of your spending. But also contactless takes out this bit of friction. And often, I don't know how often you pay with cash. For a long time since I've really been doing this for me, probably a similar thing for you. But when you pay with cash, hand the actual money over, you're really much, much more aware, really realize exactly what you're doing. And you think more about, do I want this? Do I need this? Is this too expensive? All these sort of things which you don't get when you tap. You have it to a certain extent with chip and pin, right? Because you've got to, again, look at the value, look at the total you've got to pay, you've got to put the number in. It takes a bit of time, gives you a bit of breathing space, but certainly contactless, tap, 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 you just do it without even thinking about it. You know, a few years ago, if you've been to the States in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, you'll be really surprised just how few contactless payments are accepted over there. It's increasing a lot more recently because their bank providers have really sort of made a push in the last few years to get contactless cards out there. But I mean, what was it, 3-4 years ago I went, having been tapping away here in the UK for years and years, and suddenly they wouldn't accept it. I had to sign. When did you last sign for a card payment, let alone chip and pin? This was signing for stuff. And it really, again, as I said, brought back home exactly what I was spending as a total, as a whole. I was aware that I spent $30 here on a meal, I spent $20 there, whatever it might be. It really helped me think about my money. So with the £100 increase, but even before that, £45, there is absolutely a danger with contactless that you spend more than you expected to, or more than you even realised you had. So the trick here, if this sounds like something you could possibly cause you trouble, again, as like I said, go back to the apps, check them on a daily basis, look at everything that's going on. If you aren't on your mobile app, at least go to the online banking, check those statements on a regular basis, just so you really know not just the bottom line, how much you've got, but exactly where that money is going. The only other thing really to say about contactless is around mobile devices and smart devices, because if you've got one of these, you've got Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, there's other things, other systems out there as well. It's important to say that there is no limit on these already. Unless the retailer itself sets it, which they might do, then you can pay well over £100 because this has got an additional security level already built into it. For a lot of people, it's your thumbprint. Sometimes it's your face scan, although it doesn't work particularly well with masks. Or sometimes it's just entering your code. And this is all like an extra level of security, which you don't have with the cards with contactless. So that's not going to be affected by the £100 limit. You can still spend more than that if you want to. And in fact, that could be a sign of where we go in the future. A few years ago, NatWest was trialing out biometrics, basically thumbprints on debit cards. And that could well be something that essentially we see that kind of thing in the future. Now, one last thing to say actually about the £100 limit, although right now that is the law in terms of you can do this, different retailers, different card providers, they still need to update their technology, update the payment processing points to allow this. So it might be that you do still get rejected for above £45 at the moment, but it should be as the months go on and towards the end of this year that everywhere does accept that. And they have to make sure they adhere to the rules as well, the retailers. They have to make sure that they do ask for your PIN after that £300 cumulative total or 5 different transactions. So watch out for that kind of thing as well. I think you find it more likely now that you are asked to enter your PIN than you were before. Now, if you found this useful, if that was interesting, please do hit like, leave me a comment, let me know what you think about the contactless cards and the increase to the amount we can spend on them. And as I said before, if you find this useful, if you think I'm going to help you with your money, please do hit subscribe and that little notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. My name's Andy Webb. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, cheers. And here are a couple more videos you might find interesting.